Good evening, everyone. Tonight we are in a special meeting of the school board. I would entertain a motion for approval of today's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It has been motioned and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Our first order of business, or item to discuss, is the hiring of an interim superintendent. It will be an action item, and I'll just give a little bit of an introduction to this, and then we'll open it for other board members to talk about. I first want to thank the administration and all of the employees and staff of the district. This has been a difficult week, and I appreciate your support, and I appreciate what you did for children last week in a really tough time. And it's all about the students, and I appreciate the work that you've done. We understand that this has been an anxious time, and so it's important for us. And when I speak for us, I'll say it's important to me, and we can hear from the other board members, that we move as quickly as we can to provide some stability in the district as we move forward. And in doing that, part of that would be to have an interim superintendent. And so tonight we're going to discuss as a board in front of you what we'd like to see happen as it relates to that. And so I have some thoughts, but I really want to hear from the other board members on what their thoughts are. We have met with the Minnesota School Board Association last Friday as it relates to guidance within this specific subject around an interim, and then also the next item of moving into a full search of a superintendent and what that will look like. And so there has been some recommendations or guidance, I should say, by them on steps we could take. And so we'll be discussing that tonight. Any board members want to start?
A question, are we supposed to mention people's names or not mention people's names if we have ideas? How should we approach that?
So the thought would be, as part of our guidance from MSBA, that we would determine if we want to do an internal or external interim, and then have those conversations. We obviously wouldn't want to have discussions of actual names unless that person knew about the fact that they'd be being brought up. And that might mean additional meetings, but this is what's the beauty of this process, is it's very informal compared to the process of a full search of a superintendent. So this is one of the few times we get to be very informal and have just an honest conversation about what we would like to see based on what we've heard from district employees and what we're hearing in the community. So one of the thoughts that I one of the takeaways that I had from the MSBA conversation was really about internal versus external and weighing those pros and cons. And one of the two things that glare for me to go on the external route is someone who's had experience coming in and doing this interim role for a 6-month period potentially makes a lot of sense for our district. Because we would tax whoever we would put into this role, and we would have to backfill that person, and that potentially would add stress to the district instead of helping the district, and they would have to learn the role. And while they know the district well, there's some superintendent pieces that they may not know, and so providing an external source would be something that I would really, when I looked at pros and cons, that I thought would be beneficial. But I'd love to hear maybe Gary or Neil or Dave. Neil and Dave were at that meeting. Dave represented at MSBA at that meeting as he's a regional officer for us, and then Gary as a vice chair. But Neil, you have the floor.
Yeah, we are already in the midst of enough confusion. I think to add to that confusion would be to move somebody internally into the position of superintendent. Then we'd have to deal with replacing 2 positions. I absolutely am convinced that we should seek as much guidance as we can from the MSBA They are a very competent organization, and they have a lot of experience doing these sorts of things. I believe that we should probably have an interim superintendent who has some experience doing that and is not a stranger to the kind of situation that we are in, and who has demonstrated some qualities that would convince us that that person would do a decent job of dealing with our situation.
Vice Chair Schindler?
I agree with Director Score on that front, that someone external with experience in an interim role. I think to answer Director Hoffman's question, my sense in talking to MSBA, and again, Dave was there too, that a framework for hiring is going to conceivably could be late January, with hiring perhaps happening in April. Within that context, then to me, I'm just trying to think nuts and bolts. Maybe perhaps a 6-month contract for that period of time. I just know as a board member, we have robust plans in place for literacy plan. We have master facility plans, and each principal has plans within their own building. So to me, I want to have someone with the skill set to help facilitate our administrators achieve their goals that are already established. I don't want an interim to come here and, here's one feedback item I had from a teacher, and it was, don't start moving the principals around. Well, I would hope to heck that an interim would not do that. With that said, I also want to express appreciation. Director Klott has been instrumental in giving us guidance as our Region 1 director, and Dave has been very clear that his guidance was given to us in that role. And so I really appreciate the work you've done to help us. I have faith that we'll have an expeditious process to get eventually to a new superintendent.
Director Hoffman?
To me, it doesn't make sense to limit who we would consider based on internal or external. I think, from my perspective and the feedback I've gotten from the staff I've talked to, is I would be open to either way. I'm more concerned about finding the best person and the right fit. I know of a candidate who's external who I would be interested in interviewing, and one internal, and I just think we should look at all viable candidates.
Director Klott?
Yeah, wearing my Albert Lee board hat more than anything. It has been, even at the MSBA level, this is something they don't really talk about. It's a process kind of like hiring a superintendent. We thought maybe it was a one-time deal, but it is what it is. And they give guidance. They don't give legal advice there at all. So in speaking with them, they basically said a couple things to keep in mind was, number one, do it expeditiously as you can, because you want to make sure that not only your school system and your teachers and staff and everyone feel confident in what's going on, but also the community does. Because it is a big situation when you have a turnover who's going to sign off on what's going on. They also talked a lot about trying to get someone that it's a little bit more second nature than, in other words, some experience, if you can, because we got to remember Albert Lee, Minnesota isn't a hub like the Twin Cities are, where we might have 4, 5, 6, half a dozen people that are interested in doing or that are still licensed to do it. So you got to make sure you've got all the right, because like a lot of positions, you can't just want to do this. You have to get the actual certification to do it. So, but yeah, they've been very helpful in guiding. We had that conference call on Friday. They helped us before in the search. They are the major search engine now in the state of Minnesota, and they haven't ventured outside too much out of the state, but they are the major search engine for superintendents now. It's almost a 2-to-1 over the nearest other firms. So they've given good guidance, but again, they just said, And I'll be honest with you too, you know, some people say, well, you don't do this, you're gonna lose funding. And I'll tell you, the executive director told me, and I think he told or Chair Nelson too, the state's not gonna do that to us, okay? Unless we decide to wait for 2, 3, 4 months and try to do something at that point, and then they're gonna come in and say, you know, hey, you gotta kind of be moving along. But again, you know, I don't know what kind of a candidate pool of a lot that might be available, but, yeah, it's an interesting process, and everyone's help is appreciated.
Did MSBA say they had a pool of candidates that would be interested in interviewing for an interim position?
They told us that if, however we decide tonight, that they could make a list available to us if we needed it. So they do obtain a list and maintain a list. Yeah. Good question.
I just want to say, Director Hoffman took the words out of my mouth too. I was thinking the same thing. I've talked to a lot of community members, a lot of staff members. The same name, it's an internal option, keeps popping up every time I talk to people. I would hate to, it sounds like the first couple things I heard is we want to limit this to an external, which I would hate to do. So I just want to make sure that we travel every avenue to make sure that we get the best options we have. You know, if it is an internal one and it's the best one that we have, I would love to run with that rather than limit it to an external. I think if the same name keeps popping up, that's a great thing to hear. It's my opinion there, and what I've heard from a lot of, like I said, staff members and community members there too.
What are we voting on with this?
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that there's definitely an interest in interviewing candidates or candidate for an interim position, internally or externally. So really, one of you would need to make a motion to direct the board that way, and we can have some discussion after a motion and a second, and then we would vote on that. So there's.
Before we do that, Kim, again, I'm sort of leaning on the MSBA here, and if we were to suggest that we could refer to them to collect or gather a list of candidates, both external and internal, I don't know as if we have the machinery to gather such a list. I would, let me ask Dave or Kim, you've contacted MSBA. Do they have the machinery in place to orchestrate the collection of a group of candidates? Or could we refer to their services to reach out and select or recruit candidates that we could then screen?
So I'll let Dave go too, but my understanding that this is very informal. So Barb with MSBA, Dorn, who helps with executive searches, would just provide us with the list. And it might be a situation where board members just reach out individually and just see their interest to come in for an interview. It is that informal. So it doesn't have to be a significant, like a superintendent search.
It's MSBA, it's not called an emergency situation. It's handled that way. Whereas if we do a full superintendent search, of course, we're going to have more than one name or two names. You know, we want to make sure we've got a pool. In a situation like this, because they do want to make sure someone is guiding the ship, then they do allow even one name or two names, it doesn't matter how many, but they said, just get someone that's interested. Barb Dorn said that they can provide a list. She doesn't know exactly who would be on that list, nor are they interested in driving to Albert Lea, Minnesota 3, 4, or 5 days a week. That's another thing we look at. And so it all depends upon the timing. I mean, do you want to wait a month? Do you want to wait 6 weeks? You know, we can do whichever, or do we want, as Director Skor said too, you know, shuffle around a little bit too to try to make things do. So anyway, so they didn't give us specific names, just said that Barb said her words were, I do have a list of people that I could contact to see if they had an interest in talking to Albert Lee.
I think we should compare notes. I mean, I've had feedback as well as the others on the potential internal candidate. Can we put that name on the table?
We can, but we can't discuss specifics about feedback,
Okay.
either positive or negative.
Okay,
That would be part of an interview process
sure.
and
No, that
and
makes sense.
questions.
No, I got you. That makes sense.
If I'm, yeah. Yep.
I motion that we consider all viable candidates, internal and external.
Got a motion, Angie? I'll second that.
It has been motioned and seconded that we entertain all viable candidates, both internally and externally.
No, we would have discussion on that.
Yes.
I'm certainly in favor of that. The thing that jumps out at me, though, is whatever verb you put in there, consider, entertain, what does that mean? I mean, how are we going to, what process do we have in place to entertain, consider, screen, whatever term you want to use, any prospective candidates, internal or external? How is that collection going to take place? How are candidates going to be solicited? I mean, it's very well to say that we're going to seek candidates, but
Sure.
I'd like to have something firm in place that would describe the process that seeking involves.
Dave and Gary could correct me if I'm wrong, but because it is informal, if we want to include in the motion, if the candidates, potential candidates have been talked to, that those names could be brought forward during the motion, and then we could just simply say that we would set a date to interview both of them, or three of them, or one of them, or whatever it is.
As I said, I'm certainly in favor. Obviously, we're here tonight. We're definitely in favor of finding an interim superintendent. But somehow, we're going to have to work out the details.
Sure.
I think, I don't know if I'm just, don't understand it quite yet, but what's the alternative? If the motion didn't pass, what would be the alternative? We would rock without a superintendent? Okay.
And we would be in jeopardy of 2 or 3 months down the road, maybe.
Okay.
The point of the motion is to not limit who can apply based on whether they're external or internal candidates.
Then we could have this motion and continue to discuss and then and approve or not. And then we can have the conversation about what that would look like then if we went forward.
Right, and again, it would be my suggestion that we would seek the advice of the MSBA as perhaps having some highway to this destination that we are moving to achieve.
I make certain, too, that of our language, I appreciate what Director Hoffman put on the table as a motion, but it may not even be an application process. If we get a list from MSBA, we could select someone that looks like they would be a good fit and invite them for an interview. We could do the same thing with an internal candidate or candidates. It's not, I don't foresee a formal application process. It'd be us reaching out to individuals that would want to sit and interview, and then we would make a decision who we would appoint as our interim.
Yeah, the contract is simple. It's one page.
Yeah.
It's got their name on it. It's got basically a date of start, kind of a date of end, and an amount that we're gonna pay them. That's it. Because generally, when you're dealing, now, it could be different with internals. I'm just using an external as an instant. For instance, they're retired. So they're probably already picking up their benefits, and they're not putting money into their retirement funds anymore, their TRAs or anything. So anyway, that's, yeah, very simple process. And again, it would be a list of names that, then we would need to reach out and find out if they are interested and then coordinate schedules. And, I mean, there's things that go on as simple as, Paul, the weather, right? Also, just little things like that, that all of a sudden needs a stamp of approval somewhere. And we put some people in positions if we make the call, and if the call isn't the right call, it keeps our district a little bit into a little bit of potential liability situation on that too. So anyway, just, but yeah, very simple process, but we have to find them then.
So just to clarify, did you have a question, Davey? That sign was up from before. So just to clarify, or go ahead.
I forgot to put it down.
I forget to look, yeah. Just to reiterate the motion, it's really about looking for internal, all viable internal and external candidates through MSBA or referral.
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion, if there isn't any more discussion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, motion carries 7-0. Okay, so now the discussion would be that we would, if you are okay with it, I would reach out to Barb and get a list from them. And then also board members, if you have any recommendations, we could share those with me as well. And then we would set up interviews based on that process.
Do you have an estimated time frame in mind from talking to MSBA?
We were hoping to try to expedite this within, be close to when school would come back. So there'd be someone in place for our students, staff, and faculty when they came back. So pretty quickly, yep. And what I've been hearing, I know we share that, but what I've been hearing is any kind of certainty we can have for our students and our staff right now would be the best. And so that's why I say that. Unless anybody's heard differently, I don't think, again, this is a very informal process, and it doesn't have to be as in-depth as a formal search. And so I feel if I were to weigh what was more important, I would say that more important to me is to get someone in here that can support the administrative work of the district and the students and staff.
The main certainty we have is that we've got a process going. There is no timeline. That's what's going on at this point. And I hope the community and the school district that understands that we're not pushing forward with any more than going back to committee and going to talk and see how the committee comes out. I think we had that as a administrative process 1 or 2 superintendents ago, and it takes a lot of time to get things done by committee. And so that's, I hope that Barb can get us some names. Now we're going to run into the end of the year, the first of the year, have people that are going to be interested to take a look, and hopefully we've got a pool there too. But like I said, that's the process at this point.
I did share with Barb that if we did need her assistance with the list, that I would be reaching out tomorrow, so she is aware of that. All right, so board members, you will be contacted about potential schedules through Darcy on interviews. And then it might have to be an emergency meeting based on our timeline, but otherwise it'll be posted as a public special meeting. So any other details with that piece that I forgot?
I just wonder, I guess, just since there could be some internal names, maybe they need to reach out immediately. Let's put it, maybe to expedite this, because that's what I'm concerned about. Something happens with the school district, we are liable at this table. Just so you know, I'm not gonna go into that any more than that. You only for a few days, Bruce.
Just a few days.
Maybe we should say, I don't know, 12/31, first of the year, school starts on the 6th or whatever the day. I mean, I think we should put a date for people that are interested to get back to us otherwise. And that's gonna hurt us with Barb, because she's gonna give us names that we're not even gonna know, but I don't know, that doesn't have to be. I'm just, again, I'm concerned about the timeliness of what we're looking at and processing with. Because I don't want to get to, where we don't have anyone type of deal, so.
I'd like to even tighten that up, and if we have people internally that have an interest in serving as interim, that by the end of the day, Friday, I think we move it up a week. I mean, it's gonna give us another week, and again, if we are going to be conducting an interview, even though the process can be informal, I think I'd rather move that up a week, Dave, and have internals give us a statement of interest by Friday.
27?
Yeah.
And I could have a list from Barb and contacted external potentials by that time too, so.
How will we determine the interview questions? Is that something we'll submit to you before we have interviews and?
I think we'll work with Ashley and Barb. Barb will have, she's the executive search person, and she will have stock questions for us. If there is something you'd like to ask, though, please feel free to submit that, because I think they'll be aligned perfectly with what we're gonna get from Barb, so. Okay, any questions about?
And
Go ahead.
those questions we would direct to you then, and you would relay them to Barb.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on to the next piece? Okay. Thank you for your thoughtful discussion as we move forward. So now we're going to discuss superintendent search process. Again, we did discuss with Barb Dorn Friday about what are our options as it relates to a superintendent search. The good news is that we're pretty early in that process, and she recommends that, as MSBA recommendation, that we really look at mid-January to late January to start that, and then move with that timeline with a potential hire in April. So move it back. I want to assure everybody that the conversation did circle around making sure that we had valid and extensive community input with forums and also district input. We have the time with this search to be able to do a comprehensive search of a superintendent, and we want to make sure that all of those voices are heard when we make the decision. So that makes me very happy in the process, and I think it's the most significant part of the process. What we have to determine is if we, Dave alluded to this, MSBA does about 85% of the school board searches for the state of Minnesota. We as a school board can decide we can decide to go with a different search firm. We can decide to go with MSBA, or we can do it on our own. I'm thinking that our capacity right now doing it on our own is probably, my recommendation would not to do that. But I know that the other two options come with a price. And so want that discussion. I don't know what that is. We would have to get proposals. So we can talk about what that looks like. Yeah, Dave and Gary, if you want to
Dave,
add.
do you have a sense of what the fee would be if MSBA ran our search for us?
It's honestly great timing. Last time we went out and searched for superintendent, it was not, because we started more into March and April and that, but this is the beginning of the year, of the new year, is when the bulk majority of the candidates are available and interest in looking around. So I think if the sooner, again, we get that going, but I think we're in perfect timing for that.
What about price tag? Do you have a sense of price tag?
I think last time, and you weren't in there, but I want to say it was $25,000 for the entire search, and that is they do mostly a regional search. I asked that also on Friday. They don't go out of state a lot, but they said there are a number of people that live and maybe work in a different state that are looking to come back to Minnesota, move to the area. So they do reach out a little bit, but it's mostly Minnesota candidates, which, gosh, you already know if you like the snow or not, so I guess you're gonna stick around. But, so they will have a pool. It would really be nice if we had something in the process, or at least something to talk about at MSBA. When we're up there, you never know who, we're wearing our little shirts around to the Albert Leon there. Somebody might ask us a question, that type of thing. So again, it's really good timing this time. Last time, the timing just wasn't as good.
Kim,
Go ahead.
I don't recall exactly what the cost was. It seemed to me it was less than that, but I do recall that it was, the MSBA's version is significantly less expensive than any private outside firm. And quite frankly, I think the MSBA would be more reliable.
This is an action item, so I'd like to make a motion that we post an opening for a new superintendent no later than the last week of January 2025, and that we hire MSBA to coordinate our hiring process.
I will second that motion.
All right, so there's a motion on the table to move forward with receiving a proposal from MSBA on a superintendent search no later than
No later than the end of January.
the end of January.
Gives us some wiggle room, but
Right.
I have confidence that MSBA has a good process in place that has a appealing price tag.
Any discussion?
Yeah, and Kim, and I like that because if by some miracle, some very viable candidate descends upon us in the meantime, we could still go with that option.
Can I ask a question to Paul?
Yeah,
Paul, do we have, this is in the budget, annual budget, do we budget for searches?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I want to hear.
Just one comment, as a director of Southeast Minnesota, I will abstain from the vote. So,
I would actually rather take more time to think about that, and, our search in 2022, I think, to me, it felt very rushed, and this time I really would like to take as much time as we can, put a lot of thought into it. I actually would be open to doing the search next school year. I don't know, maybe that's too far out, but I just want to put a lot of thought into it. I'm not quite ready to make a decision on MSBA or not MSBA. I would rather wait and think about that a little bit later.
any other comments?
most interim contracts are 6 months. So if we run out of an interim, then we'd have to look for another one and transist again. So just to keep that in mind, maybe you amend the motion even not to be MSBA. I'm just using that because that gives us a chance to possibly look at other firms, but, again, like I said, we can push this out and time it any way we want. It's all what we want to make sure that we've got some guidance and leadership. And possible interims do go longer than 6 months, but I know the contract is only 6 months along when we start. So it could be that they would extend.
Any other comments? My only comment would be that if we start in January, that would be almost doubling our time from the last search to allow for that community input, that stakeholder input that we weren't able to get exclusively last time. And I think that's what we were missing the last time. Plus, I'm anxious, or a little anxious about having multiple interims, and there's that potential if we go 6 months and then another 6 months. So I feel like a January to April timeframe is more feasible than what we had to work with last time.
And Kim, I do not believe that there's anything in the motion that that prescribes that we will have a superintendent in place July 1. That we will have candidates presented to us by an organization whose business it is to do that. And if we don't like any of the candidates, we could, as you say, go into another year.
All right, not hearing any other discussion, I will ask for a roll call vote. Bruce Olson? Aye. Davy Valerio?
Aye.
I'm doing this and Darcy should be doing this, I'm sorry. We'll start over. Darcy's gonna do it, I'm sorry.
Bruce,
Aye.
Davy,
Aye.
Abstain.
Kim,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Angie,
Nay.
Neil,
All right, that is 5 aye votes, 1 abstain, and 1 nay. Motion carries. All right, that has exhausted our agenda for this evening. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And I ask for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.